Okay, so we're going to try to add some functionality to this program we've been writing with the fight between the fighter and the wizard, a role-playing game type combat like Dungeons and Dragons or Final Fantasy or whatever. Um, we got our classes set up, we got the instances of our classes, our objects created. Now we need to make them do something. This might take a while. I spent a long time last night working on this and finished it up this morning. Um, so our main class where the things happen is called a combat. Here in our main program, we're creating a new instance of the combat object. I'm calling it current battle. So the current thing that's happening is a object of the combat class, an instance of the combat class called current battle. The method of the combat class where things happen is called fight. So in order to make the characters fight, I'm gonna just print current battle. Oops. Current battle, fight. I'm going to call the fight method of the battle. We'll put a couple of, I'm going to replace this print statement here. Instead of let's fight, what do we want to say here? I want let's fight. I want the print commands to correspond to what method we're in. So I'm gonna know where we are. How about we just have ready to begin here. Okay. If I run this, I don't think anything will happen. I might even get an error because I haven't really done anything in the fight method. Yeah. So what does the fight method do? Let's go to the combat class. We create two characters. In this case, I've created a fighter and a wizard. Name them player 1 and player 2. I've created a bunch of weapon objects and a bunch of spell objects that I then give to those players. Last time I didn't actually create a wizard yet, so let's create a wizard. Okay. I just had an empty constructor here for the wizard, so now let's create a constructor for the, or not a constructor, a call to the constructor for a wizard, right? We'll establish player 1 is a new fighter, player 2 is a new wizard. We give the name, the race, the level, hit points, armor class. We also need to give the wizard a spell book to choose the various spells. We just gave the fighter just one weapon that the fighter can use, but we want a wizard to be able to choose from spells. So I'm going to create, instead of just a single spell here, I'm going to create an array list, so we can change the size of it and add and take away things as we wish. So we're going to have an array list of spells called spell book. So a spell book is a collection of spells. And then we're going to add our 3 spells that we created to our spell book. So I created a fireball called spell 1, a curse called spell 2, a heal spell called spell 3, and I will add them to my spell book. So this bit of code here not only creates a list of spells, but it creates a spell book that I can then pass to my wizard when I call its constructor. So I define 3 spells. Remember, spells are objects of a class. There's a fireball class and a curse class and a heal class. I create a list of them. I call it spell book. I put the spells in the spell book, and then that spell book is what I pass to the wizard's constructor when I create her or him. Now we've got to go to the wizard's constructor and make sure it's prepared to take that, make sure it's ready to accept a spell book, which it wasn't before. The first constructor I wrote just took a single spell. So let's go to the wizards. We're now in the wizard.java class. Remember, I originally said he would just have a spell called my spell, and I said, actually right here in the comments, later let's change this to an array list of spells called spellbook. So let's make that change right now. In the wizard's class, instead of just a spell, I'm going to have an array list of spells called my spell book. Okay? And then when I write my constructor, I have to make sure that the constructor is set up to accept that. So instead of just accepting a spell, the last thing it will accept, it accepts a string for the name, a string for the race, an integer for the level, an integer for the number of hit points, an integer for the armor class. The last thing it's going to accept, and I don't think we've ever done this before, is to pass a whole array list of spells to a constructor or to any method as one of its instance variables. We've passed instance strings and doubles and maybe even objects to the constructor of a class. I don't think we've ever passed a list to a method before. So this is how you do it. Instead of just your identifier, instead of string or int, is an array list of spells. It's called SB for spellbook. So I'm passing this constructor a whole array list of spells, and then it's going to take that list of spells, and instead of just putting it into my spell, it's going to put it into my spell book. Okay? So the wizard now is created not with just a single spell, but with a whole array list of spells. All right? Good. Now what do we need to do? Let's go back to our combat. In our combat constructor, we create our weapons, we create our spells, we create our spell book, we create our objects of our two character classes, fighter and wizard. And then I think we're done with the constructor. Maybe the last thing we should do is make sure that it's clear that this has happened correctly. In other words, so that we know the constructor did all the things it should do. So let's have a print statement here that just says the combatants are ready, just so we know we're at the end of the constructor. And then I'll just print player 1 versus player 2. Player 1's owned by the combat, but its variables are still private. So if I want to print the name of player 1, I have to go player1.getName, that's the get method for the name variable of a character, versus player2.getName, that's the other character's get method for its private variable called name. I don't know. If I run this, it probably still won't work because these are different. Let's see. Oh, so many errors. Why is there an error? Because I'm trying to use an array list, and I did not, in the places in the code where it needs it, import the Java utility that lets us use array lists. So here in Combat, I have to import the Java utility array list. And it's not enough to do that once, I don't think, at least not in this IDE. In CodeHS, I have to do that in both of the places where I'm going to use it. So the wizard, and it's, there we go. The wizard class and the combat class both try to use arrays, so we just have to make sure that those classes have imported the Java utility that defines what an array list even is. There we go. There's our output statement from the beginning of my program. The combatants are ready. Oh, sorry, ready to begin. And then the combatants are ready. This print statement is in the constructor, and then it lists the names of the two characters. So I know my two characters have been created because I called them and got their names. And I'm done with my constructor of the combat, which calls the constructors of all of the other objects, the weapons, spells, and players. Now I need them to do something. So in my main program, I say current battle.fight. So that's supposed to make them fight each other. What are they going to do? Well, the fighter is going to attack with a sword, and the wizard's going to cast some kind of spell. So I need to create methods for both of those things to happen. If we look at the original way I wrote this, I wrote fighter has a method called attack, which makes sense, right? And wizard has a method called cast, which makes sense. Wizards cast spells. But the more I tried to make this work, the more I realized that's not a very Java-ish way to do this. What we want is for the characters to perform an action and for those actions to be different depending on what subclass they are. So I'm going to change these methods from attack and cast to just act. The wizard acts and the fighter acts. And that's what they do on their round. They act. They perform an action. And that action will either be an attack or casting a spell, depending on which subclass's method we call. This is polymorphism, right? You've got a method with the same name that does a different thing, whether you are a fighter or a wizard. So in order to act, I'm the one acting if I'm, say, the fighter. I need to act on something. So I will pass the act method the target. So I'm acting on the other character. Okay, so and I should change this also to act. The act method for the fighter acts on some target. So I will say player 1 act on player 2. I will pass player 2 to player 1 as you're attacking and this is what you're going to attack. You're casting a spell and this is who you're casting the spell on, because I need to know who am I fighting with, right? So right now I'm just going to leave this print statement. I attack, so I know that that something's happening. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing for the wizard. I'm going to call it act instead of cast. I'm still going to say the wizard casts a spell, but I'm just going to change the name of the method. I'm going to have it act on whatever target I pass to it. This is interesting for the wizard too, because you can ask the wizard to act on himself, right? If you're attacking with a fireball spell, you're acting on the other player. If you're acting to cast a heal spell, you're casting that spell on yourself. So this allows you, by passing the target to the method, we can have a character act on another target or act on themselves. Complicated. So the fight is going to be player 1 acting on player 2 and then player 2 acting on player 1. So let's go now to the fight method. The fight method is a method of the combat class. What is going to happen in the fight method? That's where all the action is. Okay, so let's first put in a print statement. Okay, the battle begins, just so that we know that we're in that method. This is always good, even if your final program isn't gonna have this in it. I like to put some kind of print statement in the beginning of every method so that just I know I'm there. I know when I see that print statement, all right, I'm in that fight method and something's gonna happen. How do I have them fight? I can have just player 1 act on player 2 and then player 2 act on player 1. That's a little boring because player 1 always gets to go first. In like Dungeons and Dragons, when you're having a battle, everybody rolls a die and it's called initiative, and whoever gets the highest initiative roll goes first. So let's do that. Let's use our math.random function, which we've used before, to just roll, and this isn't even in integers, this is just, right, random just creates a decimal between 0 and 1. And let's just make it a 50-50 shot. So there's a 50-50 chance that player 1 goes first. There's a 50-50 chance that player 2 goes first. Okay? So if the initiative roll is greater than a half, player 1 goes first and player 2 goes first. If it's less than a half, player 2 goes first and player 1 goes first. We could make this more complicated. We could add things like if your character's got a higher dexterity or a higher level, it gets a bonus to its initiative. Let's just make it 50-50 for now. Let's not get too complicated. So what does a fight look like? Well, it looks like player 1 acts on player 2, and then player 2 acts on player 1. Right? I don't know what's going on here. Hold on. Okay. Player 1 acts on player 2. So player 1 is my character 1. We're calling its act method, and we're passing it player 2 as its target. Right? That's the way that act method works. Let's save real quick and go back to our fighter's act method. What does our fighter's act method want? It wants a character to be the target of the action. Okay? Where was I? I was in combat. It's easy to lose your place with all of these classes. Okay, so if the initiative roll is greater than a half, player 1 acts on player 2, and then player 2 acts on player 1, and I just squish those all into one line just to be concise. I think you've seen me do that a lot before. If that's not the case, if it's less than 0.5, then the other player goes first. Just trying to line these up. Else, do it the other way around. Player 2 acts on player 1, then player 1 acts on player 2. When I was originally programming this, I made it more complicated than this, and there's a reason to make it more complicated. This will only work for a 2-person combat, right? I originally started with an array list called combatants that could have 2 people on it, or it could have 10 people on it. And then everybody could have their own initiative, and then you could sort that list by the order of the players. Let's just keep it 1-on-1 for now. We can work on, if you want to extend this on your own later by making it more complicated, we can make it more complicated. But right now, 50-50 chance that player 1 goes first, 50-50 chance that player 2 goes first. That's all I need to have a fight. In fact, that's all I need in my fight method. Player 1 acts on player 2, then player 2 acts on player 1, and then you're done. You're done with one round of combat, and then you want them to fight another round of combat, you make it happen again. You put the whole thing in a loop. We won't do that just yet. Will this run now? Do I have enough in here to make it run? Yeah. Now, all the act methods do right now is just print a sentence. The wizard casts a spell, or yarg, I attack. And there's not much happening. Now we want these actions to do something. We want the attack to hit the target. We want the fireball spell to damage the opponent. So let's go into those act methods, make them do something other than just print a sentence, and then have them affect the target. So let's do the fighter first. Fighter's pretty straightforward. Let's go to the fighter's act method. So right now, it just prints yarg, I attack. Let's do better than that. Instead of I attack, let's get the name of the person who's attacking. Okay? And I will do that like this. We've only used this keyword a couple of times. It's useful in Java just to keep track of who is performing the action, whose method is getting called, whose variables are getting addressed. The this keyword in Java you use when you want to refer to the current object who is executing its methods. So the fighter, whose name is player 1 in main, is the object whose method is being run. So this .getName gets the name of the current object that is acting. If I just did name, I would get yelled at for name being private. I still have to use a get method, even though it's me who's doing it, because I'm doing it inside of another method. So instead of just I attack, I'll give the name who attacks. Does that work? Yeah, so now it gives the name of the character who's attacking, not just I attack. How do you attack in Dungeons & Dragons? You roll some dice and you see if it's higher than the opponent's armor class. So let us, I'm having trouble with my mouse here. let's roll for attack. So we're going to generate a random number between 1 and 20. The way we do that is this. Well, no, I guess first we need to figure out if we hit. Okay, I'm jumping the gun a little bit here. To figure out if we hit, I think I've been doing this wrong. I'm looking at some of my code that I have already written. I think the numbers aren't right. I use the random.nextInt, and then I want this to be a number between 0 and 20, so it's random.nextInt 20 plus 1. Okay. And then I'm going to add a bonus to it. Whatever your level is, I'm going to add a bonus to that roll. Oh, I think it was always a hit because that number is really big for these characters. I think I made them like level 10 or whatever. I just want to make it more complicated than a dice roll. Now, if I'm using the random method, there's a couple things I have to do, right? First, I have to, this isn't math.random, this is the random int utility. So in order to use that, I need to import that utility. So I'm going to import the Java utility called random, and then I need to create a new object of the random class, and this is how we did that. Where am I? Oh, why am I in weapon? Wait, what? Oh no, sorry, I was looking at the wrong line. This is the instance variables because it's not indented. That's why I was confused. Here's the act method for the fighter. I need to, in that method, create a new instance of the random class. So the way we usually do that is this. Random equals new random. The lowercase random is a new instance of the capital R random class. So this will let me actually use that method. Okay. So I roll a 20-sided die. I get a random number between 1 and 20. And then I add this player's level. So I'm the fighter. I'm Crag the fighter. That's the name of my object. I'm going to roll a 20-sided die and then add my level to that. Okay. How do I know if I hit? Well, first let's print out that attack roll. Okay. Let's print out this dot get name, the character who is attacking, rolls a, and then that attack roll. Okay. How do I determine if it's a hit? It's a hit if your attack roll is greater than your target's armor class. So if attack roll is greater than target.getAC, I can't just say target.AC because AC is private. All the instance variables in the program are private. So if the attack roll is greater than the target's armor class, then I hit. And I'll just print out it's a hit for, and then, oops, see. It's a hit for, and then I have to figure out how much damage it does. To figure out the damage, it's a random number from 0 to the maximum damage of the weapon. The fighter has a weapon. The weapon is an object of a class. The weapon has a attribute, an instance variable called max damage. So I'm going to create a random number. I'll call it damage roll. And that's going to be a random number between 0 and this, me, the fighter, get weapon, what is my weapon, dot get max damage. That's a lot, right? This means the current object who's acting, the fighter. Get weapon means what's my weapon, and I can't just say weapon because I'm inside of a method and that's a private variable, so I have to use get weapon. And then get the max damage of that weapon. So I'm calling an attribute of an attribute. And then I'm going to add 1, so it's the minimum is 1, not 0. I think I feel like I'm a parentheses short here. No, this is the first parenthesis. This is the last parenthesis. Okay, so and then I can put a print statement. It's a hit for, and then damage roll, points of damage. Okay. And let's close that bracket for what happens if it's a hit. If it's a hit, I roll damage, I print my damage. If it's not a hit, I'll just print it's a miss. Okay, so here's my if. If attack roll is greater than the target's AC, it's a hit. Else, just print it's a miss. Really got to turn off side-to-side scrolling on this mouse. I never really want it on purpose. Okay. So if the attack is successful, we print it's a hit. We roll the damage. The damage depends on the maximum damage of the weapon. So it's a random number from 0 to this weapon's max damage. Okay. I could also add my level to that if I wanted a bonus. Let's just keep it a little simpler for now. Let's see if it works. If we need to add more. There you go. Crag rolls a 30. It's a hit for 4 points of damage. Now suddenly I'm realizing that the levels of these characters is so big that if I add your level to your dice roll, that's a crazy big number. It's always going to be a hit. So maybe I could divide it by something, but because it's an integer, that won't work. So I'm going to take that off. I'm just going to use the 1 to 20. I'll figure out some way to add that level bonus later. Maybe the fighter has another instance variable that's called hit bonus or something like that. Attack bonus, whatever. Crag rolls a 4, it's a miss. Crag rolls a 14, it's a hit for 10 points of damage, so it's working. Okay, it is checking. It's not always a hit. Okay, in fact, what's the armor class of the wizard? Where do I create that? It's in combat. The wizard's armor class is 10, I believe, or is it 6? It's 6. So anything bigger than a 6 should be a hit. 5 is a miss. 16 is a hit for 6 points of damage. So that part is working. Great. That's not all it should do when you hit somebody. It shouldn't just say it's a hit. What does it have to do? It has to take away hit points from the other character. Who is the other character? The other character is the character who we're calling target, the person we are acting on. So we have to take hit points away from the target. How do we do that? We say we're going to set the target's hit points. Target.setHP, that's a method. That's the set method for the HP variable for the target. Target.setHP to the current HP, target.getHP minus the damage roll. Okay? And if this is going too fast, I don't want this video to be an hour long, so I'm trying to go a little bit fast. If that doesn't make sense, pause the video and stare at that code and make sure you understand what it means. What do I want to do? I want to take the other guy's hit points and reduce it by the damage I just rolled. How do I do that? I need to set the target's HP with its set method to whatever its current HP is, which I need the get method to get, and then subtract the damage roll from that. Okay. In order to make sure it works, let's add in another line of code that says so-and-so's hit points are reduced to, and then the new number. So we're going to print the sentence. Print target dot, no. What am I doing? I think I just pasted the wrong thing. Yeah, I did. just a mouse situation here. I'm going to print this sentence. Target.getName, so the other person's name, the other character's name, apostrophe s hit points, are reduced to target.get hit points. So that should have changed if this worked. Their hit points should have been decreased. Let's see if it works. What are the wizard's starting hit points? Let's go back to where we create the wizard. Actually, let's save. Let's go back to where we create the wizard. That's in the combat constructor. The hit points are the second number. So the wizard's hit points are 30. Okay. Let's run until we get a hit. Crag attacks, rolls an 18 for 9 points of damage. Ursha, which is the name of the wizard, hit points are reduced to 21, so it works. Okay, it is determining the hit, rolling the damage, applying that damage to the other character, but it has to do so via the other character's get and set methods. And inside the method, that other character is referred to as, let's go back to fighter, as the target. That is a character that is passed to the method. Okay? So the fighter's act method is working. The fighter can only do one thing. The fighter can attack. We could add some other things that the fighter could do. The fighter could defend or parry, which is to just kind of stand with your shield and sword ready to defend yourself, and that increases your armor class, in which case you're acting on yourself. But for now, let's just have one thing that each character can do. We don't need to make this a fully fledged role-playing game. The point is to think about all of these methods and all of these objects and how they interact with one another. Let's run it one more time in case I made sure I didn't accidentally type something I shouldn't have. I can take another drink. Wizard casts a spell. Crag attacks. Crag rolls an 11. It's a hit for 7 points of damage. Ursha's hit points are reduced to 23, so it's working. Now let's work on the act method of the wizard. The wizard casts a spell. That's how they act. For now, again, we've got the fighters only doing one thing, whacking stuff with his sword. Let's have the wizard only do one thing, which is cast a fireball. It's going to be very similar to the fighter's action, except that an attack always does the same thing. It does damage. Spells all have different effects, so we're going to have to call the effect method of the spell that we choose to use. So let's go to the wizard. Let's go to the wizard's action method called act and see what they do. So we pass a target. I'm just going to put a blank print statement here just so that there's always a gap in between the two actions of the two players. Sorry for all the copy-paste nonsense. Instead of printing the wizard cast a spell, let's print this.getName, me, whatever object I am, get my name and print it. Why do I have to get it? Why can't I just say it? Because this is a method that is outside of the definition of the class. This.getName casts fireball. Let's just make sure that works. So it's now, it used to say the wizard casts a spell. Now it should say Ursha, which is our wizard's name, casts fireball. Great. Now that doesn't do anything yet. What is fireball? Fireball is a spell. It is a spell in my spell book. My spell book is an array list of spells. So the first thing I have to do is get fireball from my spellbook. That looks like this. My spellbook.get element 0. That's the first spell in spellbook. If you go back to where the spell was created, which is in combat, the spells were 1 is fireball, 2 is curse, 3 is heal, and we put them in the spellbook in that order. Fireball, curse, heal. So fireball is spell 0 in your spell book. Is this the best way to do this? I'm not sure, but this is the way we did it. So get 0 gets the fireball spell. Then what do I want to do? I want to call the effect method of that spell. That's where the action happens. That's where the spell does its thing. So the act method of the wizard casts the spell, which is calling the effect method of that spell object. And the effect is going to affect a target, just like attack affects a target. Okay? So again, if this line of code is perplexing to you, pause it, go to my code, look at it, make sure you know what this is doing. This is calling, first of all, when you address an array list, you have to use get. So this is getting the first element, the 0th element of the array list, which is the fireball spell, and asking it to run its effect method on the target, okay, who is passed to the act, who will be the other character, whoever that other character is. So now we need to go to the fireball spell. We need to look at its effect method. Right now it just prints whoosh, the wizard casts fireball. Let's improve upon that. First of all, when we originally wrote these, empty classes that didn't do anything, we didn't have the effect methods acting on anything. So we have to say here what the effect method wants, what it gets as a parameter is a character who is the target, a thing that we're going to call target of class character. And we're going to need to roll damage again, so let's import our random utility up here. It's got to be the beginning. So we're going to import Java utility random, and we're going to create a new method, a new instance of, whoa, I just pasted over something, a new instance of our random class. So random class instance called lowercase random is a new object of the random class. We already had the wizard cast fireball in the act method, so we don't need that. I guess all we need to do is roll damage. Okay, fireball automatically hits you. It's a big blast of fire. We're not going to do things like saving throws or whatever if you know your Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm just going to roll for damage. What is the damage? It's a number from, in Dungeons and Dragons you roll a certain number of 6-sided dice depending on your level. So I'm going to make it a random number from 1 up to 5 times your level. So the higher your level is, more powerful your spell is. So damage roll is random next int 5 times get level, so 5 times this character's level, plus 1. That sets the top to 5 times your level, or 6 times your level actually, and then we're going to add the bottom is just plus your level. So that's if your first level, that's a number from 0 to 6. If your second, it's from 2 to 12. If your third, it's from 3 to 18. I think, if I did that right. And then we'll print out that damage. System out print, the fireball does, and then whatever that damage roll was, points of damage. Scroll over a little bit. Points of damage. Okay. Then what do we need to do? We need to take those hit points away from the target, the other character. So target.set hit points, set the hit points of the other character to get their hit points, and then take away the damage roll. Okay. And then let's have that statement where we report the damage. Target.getName, your name, whoever I just shot a fireball at, hit points are reduced to, and then get that target's hit points. Okay. Do I got a semicolon on there? Yes. Let's see if this works. Ooh. Oh. Yeah, this is something that, this is a problem that happened the first time. I I haven't quite figured out why this doesn't work yet. But because Fireball and Heal and Curse are all spells, I need to make sure that the parameter list for the superclass and the subclass match. So I just have to make sure that even though the effect method of the generic spell doesn't do anything because we don't have any generic spells that are just spell, I need to make sure it accepts the same parameter list. So I think that's that error. Yep, there you go. The combatants are ready. The battle begins. Ursha casts Fireball. The Fireball does 5 points of damage. Craig's hit points are reduced to 45. I know that I created him with 50, so that's good. That works. Crag attacks. Crag rolls a 5. It's a miss. If I want to roll the battle again, I can roll it again. Fireball does 3 points of damage. That's not great. Reduced from 50 to 47. Crag rolls a 16. That's a hit for 7 points. Reduces the wizard's hit points, which I know started at 30 to 23. It's working. The only thing I might add in the main program is after we run a round of battle, I'll just print something to the effect of print battle round complete. Okay, so now everything's nicely spaced. There's a space between the rounds. At least when there's a miss, there's a space between rounds. 10 points of damage. Battle round complete. If I wanted them to fight to the death, what would I do? I would take this whole fight. I would put it inside of a loop that keeps going until one of the character's hit points is reduced to 0 or less, and then that character is dead. Okay? And I could keep making this more and more complicated. I may just make it an extra credit assignment to mess around with this program and make it better. If it's your kind of thing, if it's something you're interested in, what features could we add to it? We can add all kinds of features to it. We could, first of all, flesh out the other 2 spells, which we haven't made do anything yet. We could make a little decision loop at the beginning of the wizard's act method, where they look at their spell book and there's 1, 2, 3 spells, and they choose which spell they're going to use. You could even make the wizard check their own hit points, and if their hit points are less than half, they cast heal on themselves. Okay, so there's all sorts of things we could do to make this more complicated. We could add other instance variables to the characters. The fighter could have a strength that makes their attacks more powerful. The wizard could have a wisdom or an intelligence or a focus that makes their spells more powerful. I think now we can see how we might make this as complicated as a real either tabletop game or video game. I think we can also see how complicated those video games must be behind the scenes to do all the things they do, plus have every character have a physical appearance and move in a particular way and have certain animations. All of those things nowadays are objects that are being called, and methods of those objects that are being called as the program runs. Okay, so that was a long one, but we got what we wanted out of that, I think. What I wanted out of that was for you to see a Java program with a pretty complicated class structure and a pretty complicated relationship between the objects and their methods and one another. When I am a fighter who is attacking, I have a target that I'm attacking that is a wizard, that is an object of the same class as me, or at least a subclass of the character class. And so this idea of objects acting on one another, objects getting and setting each other's instance variables, is central to the whole idea of Java. So maybe this is the last video I'll do about this program. Maybe I'll program a more complete version of it and post it and just not do a video. Just say, hey, go look at this if you want a more complete version of it. Maybe I will post a more complete version of it and ask you to just go explain various parts of it and how they work. Some of these lines of code, like Where is it? In Fireball. Fireball? You know, some of these lines of code where you are calling a method of an object and then asking for that object's instance variables to change them, or to tell that object to change them. There's a lot of object-oriented programming happening in there. And I've confessed a couple times, I don't tend to think like an object-oriented programmer up front. We only had to make a couple of changes. If we go back to the original kind of skeleton of this program we wrote, we only made a couple of changes in order to make it do what we made it do, and that was the point of that first video. To think ahead to this functionality so you don't have to change it up too much on the fly, because the more you change on the fly, the harder it is both to make that happen and to remember what your structure is, which is one of the hardest parts of this. What are the objects? What are the classes? What are their attributes? All right, so I'll go ahead and leave it at there. And what I'll probably ask you to do this week is to take your classes that you made the week before and make them do something. Make them actually act on one another, and have methods that produce some sort of interesting, meaningful output.